Story 1, those fun universe animations that start out with the Earth or maybe something on Earth, then zoom out bit by bit, comparing us to something larger in the universe. Then it keeps going. You can't see Earth anymore, but you can focus on the sun. But then the sun is gone. And we're still getting smaller because we haven't gotten to the biggest object yet. Smaller and smaller and smaller. We barely even exist. But I complain about the drive to Dallas. Story 2. I was raised Mormon. When I learned how much was copied from the Freemasons, I began looking at the non-church sources for information. Finding out your whole life has been a lie is a hell I wish on no one. Story 3. My son is 5 now, and I still look at him dumbfounded at times. Like, I made you. You grew inside of me, and now you exist with your own consciousness and continue to grow. Crazy. Story 4. The double-slit experiment. Even when you slow the experiment down so that it is only a single photon or electron being measured, you still see the interference pattern. Unless you put your detector behind the slits, then it's a solid set of 2 lines behind the slits. It's almost like the universe is rendering itself differently based on observation. Story 5. That everyone you know or have met has a different version of you in their minds. Their perceptions are based on their interactions or impressions of you. No one really sees you exactly the same way. Story 6. I read somewhere that we can only see about 0.0035% of the electromagnetic spectrum, meaning we are practically blind to most of what is going on around us. It made me question how much of reality is hidden from us, existing beyond what our senses can perceive. Another one that shook me was learning that trees can communicate with each other through underground fungal networks, sharing nutrients and even warning each other about threats. It completely flipped my understanding of forests. They are not just a collection of individual trees, but more like an interconnected community working together. Reality suddenly seemed a lot more complex. Story 7. These were both from when I was relatively young, 7 or 8, and obviously as a result of the religious environment I was raised in. There are religions other than Roman Catholicism. I thought Roman Catholicism was just what everybody did. People actually believe their religions are true. I thought that everyone else was just going along with things for whatever reason, as I was, because even as a kid, none of it made sense. I quickly learned that questioning things just got you in trouble, so I did what I was told. Story 8. Most everything is made up of nothing. The distance between the nucleus of an atom and the electron is insanely large. If the nucleus were a ping-pong ball, the electron would be about 2 miles away. Story 9. It is literally impossible to describe in words what quantum superposition is. Everything you've heard about quantum superposition is, at best, sort of right, but also a lot wrong. But we do not have a way to describe it properly, so those incomplete explanations like Schrödinger's cat and both and neither at the same time, just stick around, because without understanding the math, you just cannot understand quantum superposition properly. Quantum reality is simply that different from macroscopic reality. Our intuition cannot comprehend what is happening. I do not understand quantum superposition, and unless you are a theoretical quantum physicist, neither do you. And some of them do not. But we know it is real. It happens. It affects reality. We cannot convey what is happening with words. That confounds me greatly. Story 10. I read once that the arrangements of molecules, cells, or atoms, I really can't recall what precisely, look eerily similar to the way galaxies and clusters look. This made me think that perhaps our universe is just a subatomic thing within something larger, like a fly in a cat's rear. Imagine that. Story 11. Light doesn't experience time. From its departure from a quasar on the far end of the universe to a sensor on a space telescope that was built a decade ago, the journey took almost the entire lifespan of existence. And yet, as far as the photon is concerned, the trip was instantaneous. If that wasn't wild enough, here's the real revelation. There's no such thing as a free photon. They only exist as a carrier for energy exchange between electrons. For a photon to exist, it must have a sender and a recipient. 2 electrons separated by the entirety of space and time somehow agree to exchange a photon. Story 12. Quantum entanglement. There are particles light years apart that react instantaneously when the other is touched. We live in a world of magic and wonder. Story 13. Just learned today that if a photon enters a cloud of cold atoms, it can leave that cloud before it enters. Negative time. Story 14. When you do a proper shuffle of a normal 52-card deck, the resulting order of the cards has a nearly 100% chance of being the first time that order has ever occurred in the history of the universe. Story 15. After reading some of these comments, I can honestly say I'm questioning the reality that I have a functioning brain. What I do know is I do not understand 99% of the comments. Story 16. My S6 chemistry teacher, Scottish equivalent of 13th grade, finished one of our final few lessons and then said, "Of course, we don't actually know that atoms and molecules exist. It all just fits with the models we've built so far." And I realized that no human has ever actually seen an atom. Also, more existential. I was studying philosophy at university and learning about David Hume's bundle theory of identity. He asked if a boat was refurbished plank by plank. Would a boat that was 100% refurbished actually be the same boat? What about a church that was burned down and rebuilt? Same name, same location, same parishioners. Same church? Is an old man who can't remember his actions as a child the same person as the child whom he now can't remember? Basically, it made me realize how situational we are as people. The man I am in bed with my significant other is not the man I am leading my team, is not the man I am on Reddit. Story 17. Not really a fact, but a feeling. I was raised in a religious setting, so the question became, if God made everything, who made God? I used to spiral into these thoughts, like, how does the universe exist? Where did everything come from? How is it possible to exist? Nothing can exist. I eventually learned about dimensionality and put it to bed with the fact that whatever the answer is, I have no capacity to understand it anyway. Story 18. A large percentage of people don't actually have an internal voice. Some research suggests it's between 30% and 50%. Many people don't realize they don't have it because they still have an inner voice, but it's just imagery, not an actual voice. For instance, one subject did all the same tests as people with an inner voice. It wasn't until the researcher gathered more information that they found out this man's inner voice was just colored shapes. The man thought this was normal as his brain deciphered these shapes the way our brain does with the actual inner voice we have. So basically, there are millions of people who are asked, "Do you have an internal monologue?" And they all answer yes, even though it's non-auditory. Story 19. Apparently, schizophrenia can affect anyone at any time, and using psychoactive drugs like LSD and magic mushrooms significantly increases the chances of developing schizophrenia. To keep a long story short, it isn't a stretch to say that most religious and philosophical figures of our past were probably schizophrenic, since many religions and metaphysical questions before science were based on visions, voices, and generic signs of whatever sparked their tirades. This makes me wonder a lot about how reality and unreality are just a matter of perception. Story 20. Your tear ducts are connected to your nose and throat, meaning you can actually taste things by putting them in your eye. Apparently, everyone knew this except me. It's also why you get a runny nose when you cry. Story 21. I don't know about reality, but learning about the damage that was done to our brains by leaded gasoline made me question free will. Generations of people all over the world lost a few intelligence quotient points along with some impulse control and emotional stability. And it didn't just go away. Children's brains are still being poisoned in some areas. Story 22. If you had a really long stick that connected to the moon and you pulled the stick, the other end of the stick wouldn't move instantly. It would take as long as it takes for the speed of sound traveling through wood to reach the moon from Earth for the other end to move as a result of your pulling the stick. I think the thing that gets me about this is I knew everything I needed to know to reach this conclusion on my own, but I had literally just never thought about this specific hypothetical before, and when you actually write it out like that, it feels so counterintuitive even though I intellectually understand all the component pieces that make it true. Story 23. I learned today that you can sever the connection between both sides of your brain and both hemispheres will continue to operate without knowing that the other exists. Some other wacky stuff that I'm not educated enough to explain, but search for split brain experiments. Sounds so fake. The brain is weird. Story 24. It may be the case that the universe goes on forever in all directions, and it's all just as full of galaxies as what we see around us, and that there is no center. There are infinite Shakespeares, and one of them wrote a play about monkeys. He called it Monkbeth. That could be literally true. Story 25. Brain-eating amoebas are everywhere, and the only reason people don't constantly die from them is that it's really hard for them to enter our bodies through our nose. Story 26. I remember watching a video on how the universe might end. It was a 30-minute time-lapse of what occurs from the Big Bang to the end. Earth's entire existence from beginning to end wasn't even a minute before it formed and burned out. It really felt insignificant just trying to comprehend the time frame of the universe. Story 27. The consciousness lag. That your mind has already subconsciously decided on a particular choice a fraction of a second before you choose it consciously. We might be more predictable than we think, I guess. Story 28. The birthday paradox is a fun one. I wouldn't say I question reality as I am a math nerd, but it's fun to share with people who aren't so inclined. For those unaware, it deals with the probability of two randomly chosen people out of a larger group having the same birthday, and that you only need a room of 23 people for that probability to be greater than 50%. With 50 people, it becomes 97%. To explain a little further why this seems so surprising or impossible for most people when they first hear this, it's because people often confuse the premise of the probability that two randomly chosen people share a birthday with the probability that one other randomly chosen person shares my birthday, which is not the same calculation. Story 29. The fact that we can only see a tiny part of the electromagnetic spectrum, and there is a wide range of light frequencies that we cannot see made me realize that reality is only limited by our biological senses. Story 30. Human comprehension of reality is so far from accurate it's functionally useless. Every understanding or scientific discovery we make is at best just us trying to make things make sense to us. But humans simply don't have the brain power or hardware to come anywhere close to an actual understanding of reality. It's like an ant walking on an iPhone. Its brain can process things like, this surface is smooth, and there is no food here. And that's about as complex as it can get. But that's nowhere near the level of complexity of the iPhone itself. Story 31. That unidentified flying objects and unidentified aerial phenomena are acknowledged by the United States government, and Congress is currently debating legislation about whether or not to declassify information related to them that has been kept hidden by top-secret defense programs since 1947. All of this is being spurred by multiple whistleblowers whose information was recently leaked by the Inspector General's office, making astonishing claims under oath before Congress, such as exotic materials being in the possession of defense contractors, and even more incredibly that non-human biological material has been recovered from crashed unidentified aerial phenomena. All of it seems unbelievable and might very well be complete nonsense, but the attitude of our elected officials, who have been privy to more information than us, suggests to me that there's more to it all. Story 32. Rock beats scissors. Sure, I get it. Scissors beat paper. Again, makes sense. Paper beats rock. What? That's some serious we live in a simulation situation. Story 33. Almost everything you see, hear, and read every day is engineered so that you will see it, not randomly, to make you feel like you've formed opinions, wants, and thoughts yourself. Once you start getting into content planning, search engine optimization, advertising, brand management, and so on, you start to realize that it's all manipulated. I cannot begin to express the extent to which everything is manipulated. Awards, information, culture, diets, how you feel about yourself, and what you think you should spend money on. That company or brand you see in all the good publications. Paid for, not earned. Nothing is earned anymore. It's manipulated and paid for. Focus on truly cultivating peace of mind outside the realm of brands, consumption, and advertising. Story 34. Saw this on Reddit last week. It blows my mind and I'm lost. In your car, you can reach from the driver's seat to the passenger door. You might have to lean. However, you cannot be on the left-hand side of a bus and reach across to touch the right-hand side of the bus. But both vehicles fit in a single lane on the road. Story 35. Something is wrong with our fundamental understanding of physics because the space concepts, dark matter concepts, and black hole concepts don't work the way mathematics says they should. We're basically as clueless as Aristotle. Story 36. Our brain backdates movement, so it seems like we decided to do things. For example, your hand reaches out for a piece of popcorn. Moments later, you have a thought to grab that piece of popcorn. Your brain rearranges your perception so that it seems to you that you thought about grabbing the popcorn before you reached for it. Story 37. Aphantasia. I was nearly 40 when I learned that I experienced this thing and that it's not the default experience of most humans. I always thought that people were speaking metaphorically when they talked about picturing something, mind's eye, etc. I'd assumed, or rather just never questioned, that we all experience our thoughts and sensory inputs in a similar way. Story 38. The left and right hemispheres of your brain see or attend to the world in completely different ways, and the left hemisphere's appreciation of the world is often false and in some senses delusional. If you are interested in learning more about this topic, read Dr. Ian McGilchrist's work. It will change the way you view yourself and the world.